Hey everyone, I'm Rum, and welcome to today's video. With episode Heresy, we've been delving into the Nether, finding secrets, fighting bosses, and most importantly, farming loot. And I know many of you guys are having problems with getting through the entire run before blowing through all of your revives. But no worries, these 3 builds can help you and your team get through the Nether runs and claim that sweet, sweet loot. The first build I have is made for those of you running with at least one other teammate. We have a Strand build that focuses on healing your teammates with the new Strand support rifle adamantite, while spreading debuffs around an entire room. Our aspects are Flechette and Banner of War, a common combination in Strand Titan builds. Our fragments will be threads of propagation for more unraveling rounds, fury for more melee energy, warding to grant us more damage resistance with woven mail, and transmutation to create a bunch of tangles. Your exotic should be Wishful Ignorance, but you can run Syntheseps if you feel calm enough when surrounded by enemies. Remember to keep up with your team and keep them in your Banner of War aura to keep your melee charges up, and to boost just a little bit more health. Health is this content's resource, since you must ensure you're constantly topped off or risk losing a revive. There are only a few ways to heal in the Nether, and the main one is to pick up health drops, but they can be pretty scarce sometimes. Another more consistent way to heal is with support frame auto rifles, which heal more depending on your initial health, meaning the lower health you are, the better healing you receive. Adamantite is the second of these support frame rifles, and unlike No Hesitation, when you heal a teammate, unraveling needles will shoot out and track the nearest enemies from the person you healed. Pair this with the Strand perks in this season's artifact, you're able to spawn threadlings from unraveled targets, grant unraveling rounds to Strand weapons from orb pickups, and the Titan Aspect Flechette Strand debuffs will hit enemies in almost every room you enter. The perks you'll want on this Adamantite should be Reciprocity or Slice in the 3rd column, depending on if you'd rather spread debuffs or preserve your own health, and Circle of Life in the 4th column since no other perk here is good enough to grant losing a constant damage buff. For your secondary weapon, you can run any arc special to proc Photonic Flare, another artifact perk, and I personally like running Indebted Kindness with Volt Shot, but if you've gotten some runs already finished and have a good Psycho Pomp, then I recommend taking that in rooms where you can deny enemy spawns. Other non-arc options could be a Baron Action with Heal Clip for more boosted health gains, Velocity Baton with Attrition Orbs. Just be aware orb pickups do not heal you. And lastly, any shotgun with 1-2 punch or trench barrel, since that makes Flechette do more damage. And thus that speeds up the process of spreading Sever debuffs. And for our last weapon, this was a tough one, but I ultimately ended up on Tractor Cannon to deal with annoying bosses and mini bosses that wall your runs. More specifically, the Tormentors. Even though this doesn't help with dealing with bosses who need more precision damage than body damage, the added weaken on top of the minor stuns is an excellent pair to the already great combination of Sever plus Arc debuffs. The last thing I'll talk about for this build is boons, and I'll do that for the rest of them as well. You pick these up randomly from running through the Nether, but with the new ghost mods added into the game, you can increase the chance of finding certain boons. Some boons to pick up that help the build the most are Regenerating Strike, Grenade Recharge for do ability spam more often, Herald of the Deep for more strand damage, and the major boons to look out for are Classical Healing and Healing Finishers. Heads up though, for this build, do not pick up any Grenade Finisher boons. If you do, make sure to throw it before you attempt to grapple. I've had a few times where I died from this. That's a skill issue, but more often than not, I'll kill the enemies I want to grapple melee and lose my Banner of War. The next build is for those who want to try and blaze through the Nether solo. We're using a Solar Titan build with Soul Invictus and Roaring Flames. This build is centered around causing as much scorch around you as possible and therefore more ignitions to spawn more sunspots, clear ads, and grant major ability regen. Now unfortunately, Soul Invictus does not heal you in the Nether, but you may find that the added regeneration it provides is still active. You should take advantage of this. We have Embers of Singeing, which we'll explain why in a moment, Char to ensure all ignitions grant Scorch, Eruption to increase the size of our ignitions, and Ember of Ashes to speed up the long process of making an ignition, while also speeding up Ember of Singeing. So why am I focusing so hard on our class ability? Well, that's thanks to our exotic Lorelei Splendor Helm. We can spawn a sunspot right after we cast our Barricade, and if we hit low health, our barricade will be used immediately to spawn a sunspot, which will scorch our targets, increase our regen, and grant us another barricade to keep the cycle going. That being said, this build is good at locking down where enemies want to push you from, placing your barricade wherever you see fit, stand behind it, and then throw your abilities wherever else the enemies are pushing from. You don't want to panic and move around a bunch with this build. Remain calm and take whatever picks you can to stay alive. You can make a safe space even if you're surrounded because of your sunspots. Weapon-wise, you want a big debuff weapon, and Tenacious Mastery is an excellent option. You'll want Chill Clip to deal with all 3 champion types thanks to anti-barrier sidearms to slow down whatever enemies and champs decide to push you. Tenacious seems to do everything you want it to do, and I doubt I need to explain it anymore, so we'll move on to our primary weapon, and we have another meta favorite, Zali's Bane. We're using it with explosive payload plus incandescent to ensure enemies go down with a Costco Guys certified. But really you can swap this out to any legendary primary with incandescent, since that's the only important part. Reason being, when enemies are scorched and die to incandescent, they'll create more sunspots for you once your cooldown is gone, which will further spread scorch, thus increasing your ability regeneration even more. And our last weapon is Whisper of the Worm. This was a pretty easy pick for several reasons. First reason is our other weapons cannot excel in a crit damage situation. Second, since Chill Clip doesn't increase damage like Sever or Unraveling can, we're going to need a good way to deal with Tormentors and the Taken Eye boss. And the last reason, Whisper can't do self-damage like a few other boss DPS options do. But if you don't see that last reason as a good enough issue, then you can use Sleeper Simulant to fill this role, especially with Particle Reconstruction. Or if you have another way to deal with Tormentors, like using Critical Anomaly instead of Tenacious Mastery, you can use Dragon's Breath, which provides more ignitions, Scorch, and Fire Sprites, which will just speed up the cycle of ability spam even more than before. Last thing for this build, some boons that you're going to want to take are Herald of the Sky for more light subclass damage, aka Solar, Classic Recharge for the Sunspot spam, and to top it off, Classical Healing since we're already spamming our class ability. And onto our last build, which is best when used in a group but can excel in a solo situation, is the Storm's Keep LMG build. Arc Titan is back on the menu thanks to the new aspect, and if you're looking to do a lot of damage across an entire team, then this build is for you. For our aspects, we're running Storm's Keep with Touch of Thunder to maximize Bolt Charge, then our fragments are going to be Sparks of Amplitude for Orb Generation, Discharge to produce a lot more Ionic Traces and Bolt Charge, Ions, which more Ionic Traces, and Resistance to keep us alive when surrounded by enemies, which we will for sure be thanks to our Barricade Taunts. The exotic we're going to be using for this build is Actium War Rig. This may come as a shock to some of you, as it did for me when I was first using it, but thanks to Storm's Keep, rapidly hitting targets is better than burst damaging them, and there are no better boss DPS options that are fully automatic than LMGs. And thanks to War Rig's trait, all our auto rifles and LMGs will be reloaded gradually when using them. So with that in mind, all our weapons are auto rifles, and we will start off with a returning guest, Adamantite. If you skip the Strand build, this weapon heals your teammates when hip firing and launches Unraveling Needles from their last healed teammate, which will debuff enemies' hit. So running this with Slice is a must, since we'll be dealing a lot of arc damage with our abilities and our heavy that I'm going to bring up in a second. Our second weapon is going to be Choir of One for multiple reasons. The first one, Choir of One is a great start to boss DPS, regardless of if it's a crit spot or not. The last few episodes, it was one of the best DPS options for bosses in general. It may not be as powerful as it once was, but this build, it for sure excels. The next reason is Choir of One's ADS mode is excellent for spreading destabilizing rounds, and thanks to our artifact, plus the Tome of Want perk, we're able to generate volatile rounds and grant ourselves more class abilities, which will then grant us more bolt charges and keep that cycle going. With our exotic out of the way, our last weapon is the Watchful Eye. It's a new arc aggressive frame LMG, and it rolls with some great options. The one that I'll be using is Overflow and Jolting Feedback. This grants you more ammo and grants you more hits to proc Jolt. The gun also runs with the new Elemental Honing perk, which increases the weapon's damage when causing another type of elemental damage. However, that perk doesn't really excel in this kind of build since most of our damage comes from arc, including our abilities. If you're going around clearing rooms with this weapon specifically, I think you should run it with Rolling Storm, since that'll grant you even more stacks of Bolt Charge. But it doesn't do much boss DPS when you have that perk. If you want to run it like a mini Thunderlord, the best bet is to run it with Joltic Feedback, so you can kill small enemies near the boss and generate more Ionic Traces to grant even more stacks. The boons you'll want to pick up are just like the last build, Classical Healing and Classical Recharge, so we keep spamming our class ability and keep our buffs up, with some added ones are Regenerating Strikes and Grenade Recharge to generate more Jolt and Ionic Traces. And that wraps up all 3 builds. I hope you guys run these and let me know what you think. If you liked any of these builds or the video, remember to subscribe. I'm on my way to 400 subscribers and I hope to hit 1,000 by the end of 2025. And with everything said and done, my name is Rum. I'll see you all next time. Bye bye.